What do you think of when you hear the word continuous? If you're a developer, maybe you think about your continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline. Or maybe you're in DevOps, in which case maybe you're thinking about continuous testing and continuous monitoring. Or maybe you're in compliance, in which case you might be thinking of continuous audit. But where is the security in all of this? All too often, security is left out of these loops. It's considered a final checkbox activity, the annual assessment. Some organizations, they treat security like, hey, we deployed an endpoint solution, got our pen test, got a rock, done for the year, woo! Or others might have that one and done attitude to their security controls. They might be thinking, well, we've had one background check done before hire, tick. One IDS box deployed, then promptly forgotten about, tick. Checkbox security. But we all know that security is not just the last step. Security is everyone. Security is everywhere. Security needs to happen all of the time. We need to include security in all phases, not just at the end. Because fixing problems at the end is costly. When we shift left our security controls, when we move them earlier in that development process, we find problems sooner and fixing them's easier. Now, within the PCI standards, continuous processes are part of making security business as usual. It's baked directly into many of the PCI DSS requirements, and it's encouraged as good practice in many more. It's about ensuring our security controls continue to operate as normal throughout the course of business. But I'm sure you all know this, which is why today I'm going to talk about these concepts and contrast them with another organization that was, let's just say, less than successful with their security controls. This presentation draws heavily from the details of an actual breach that occurred years ago. The organization in question is a well-known theme park that fell victim to industrial espionage. The CEO of the park claimed to have spared no expense in creating the most advanced amusement park with all of the latest technologies. But the truth is that security was not part of that organization's DNA. It was not ingrained within the company culture. It was not business as usual. And as you all know, even the most expensive technology does not guarantee security without robust, repeatable processes and procedures. Now, because this case study is based on an actual incident, I'm not allowed to use the name of the company. So, for the purposes of today, we'll simply refer to them as Dinosaur Park. Now, although the incident did not involve cardholder data, the information systems of the organization were breached, leading to the loss of valuable industrial secrets and property. Some of you might already be familiar with the incident because much of the information that I'm presenting today is already out there. It's in the public domain. There's a famous documentary. There's legal documents, and there's leaked images from the CCTV system. So let's go step by step through the attack and see how PCI controls and continuous processes might have made a difference. Let's start with this guy. This is Dennis Nedry. Dennis is the primary suspect in the ongoing criminal investigation. He's a programmer, and he's also a self-professed tech wizard. and allegedly a malicious insider. Authorities suspect that his financial difficulties caused him to engage in industrial espionage, selling the park's most valuable assets, data and dinosaur embryos, to a competitor, allegedly compromising the park's logical and physical security controls to smuggle the goods out of the park. Denis's current location remains unknown, though some believe, given the nature of the incident at the park, that it may actually be the location of Denis's remains that are unknown. Nedry is a developer, and the first part of his plan was to write malware to disable the park's security systems like cameras, gates, logging, phones. He told park staff some systems would go offline because he was recompiling code. And then he sneaked into a restricted area and he stole some dinosaur embryos before driving out of the front gates with them. So let's point out some of the failures in the security controls here. Denis started out by writing malware and pushing it directly into production with no oversight, no documentation. Now, that would be quite a few failures right there had the organization been following PCI DSS. The DSS requires that changes be reviewed, documented, approved, tested. It requires separate environments for production and pre-production. Compiling code in a developer environment should never take down production systems, much less security systems. The PCI DSS requires separate job roles for production and pre-production, code reviews for any code being deployed. Denis should never have been able to write applications and push them into production alone. Organizations with a continuous integration and continuous deployment, or CI/CD pipeline, can automate controls to prevent these problems and ensure security checks happen for every code change. Continuous integration allows you to build security gates to protect every step in the process. Automated vulnerability scans, automated tests for coding or configuration errors, unit tests, making sure pull requests are only approved if no vulnerabilities are present. Deploying only if all security tests pass 100%. By ensuring that security starts with the code and is tested before and after deployment, you can build end-to-end security throughout a CI/CD process. The PCI DSS comes with requirement options and guidance that encourage all of this. For example, in the case of the incident at the park, a simple anti-malware scan might not have detected Nedry's custom Trojan horse. But if you combine that with post-deployment continuous behavioral analysis, it's possible they might even detect zero-day threats. Now, after running his malware, Nedry's next step was to physically steal dinosaur embryos from a vault. This high-security area had controls comparable to some of those that we might find in PCI card production, which includes requirements for protecting a vault that contains cards and card components. The park had locked doors, cameras, and even sally ports for vehicles. They had deployed lots of technology, but in the end, it was useless because it was not supported by processes. Nedry's malware disabled all the logging. He disabled the cameras. He disabled the door locks. And then came the worst news ever. It turns out this was not the first time that Denis Nedry had done this. An accomplice later testified that Nedry had run the malware and accessed the vault during a trial run of the heist. This means that all of the park's controls had failed previously, and nobody noticed, either during or after the fact. The PCI car production requirements, had they been in place, call for guards to monitor the video cameras. And if the CCTV video feed is lost, the system must make an audible alarm that the guards need to respond to. As soon as the door locks failed, the guards would have investigated. They would detect an attack while it happens. But more than that, car production lays out proactive testing of the security controls. This is a form of continuous audit, where the entity's testing their own controls for defects and failures. Every month, a car production site tests their own cameras, external lighting, alarm batteries. Every 3 months, they test their duress buttons and alarms on external doors. Continuous controls monitoring ensures their controls function before, during, and after any attacks. Now, going back to the incident at the park, the subsequent investigation revealed weaknesses in the access control process. Now, part of a zero trust architecture is following the principle of least privilege. So, when a breach occurs, the scope of that breach is limited. PCI DSS requirement 7 applies this principle, but once again, this cannot be a one-time thing. For instance, in this incident, Nedry clearly had too much access to systems and areas. He had full access to all IT systems and the vault containing genetic material, even though his position did not require it. Of course, over time, users' access needs to change. It needs to evolve, especially if they change roles within the business. But that access must still be limited to only that which is necessary for their position and job function, which is why their access should be reviewed as part of that continuous audit. The PCI DSS includes this explicitly, calling for user access reviews every 6 months. And the process of changing a user's role or department should include a re-evaluation of their access as good practice. Ideally, these role changes should also trigger another proactive measure: screening, to identify risks from malicious insiders. In the case of the park, additional screening may have identified Nedry as a disgruntled employee with financial problems. But strangely, in this case, it turns out that management actually knew about these issues, but didn't take any steps whatsoever to address them. But we'll talk more about management's role in just a bit. Unfortunately, Nedry was successful in his theft of company secrets and property, and so far, as I mentioned, he's not been apprehended. We've not found Dennis. But how did the park respond to the attack? Well, first of all, they didn't discover the attack until after the death of a park guest. They were not reviewing the logs or responding to the security alerts until after the breach. Had they been following the PCI DSS, however, they would have been required to perform daily automated log reviews. And for better security, maybe they would have been continuously monitoring real-time user and device behavior. Maybe they would have used a SIEM, a security incident and event management tool, to analyze logs and identify threats. The park's incident response was obviously ad hoc. They simply made it up as they went along. They actually included park guests in the response team, which was necessary only after their last IT administrator was, well, eaten. The PCI DSS requires a detailed incident response plan, which is tested every year. But for an incident response team to be effective, they should conduct regular exercises and training. In this case, it's up to the organizations to decide which level of continuous fits them, because the PCI DSS says to perform a targeted risk analysis, a TRA, to determine how often that training is needed. TRAs help organizations determine the optimum frequency of security controls based on their threats, based on their environment. But it's unlikely that the results of a TRA will ever be, just do it once. Now, unfortunately, the park's disaster recovery process was not any better than their ad hoc incident response. They didn't have a plan. In fact, one administrator was quoted as saying, "We've never shut down the entire system before. It may not come back at all." But perhaps the most alarming part of it all were the implications about the staff's attitude to security. For security to be a continuous process, to be ingrained as business as usual, you must have the people on board. You need a security-first culture that empowers people to stand up and say, "No, we can't move forward with this until we've considered security," or to raise the alarm when necessary, to report that suspicious behavior. These were attributes and attitudes that did not appear to be present within Dino Park based on the evidence. What did the park staff do? Nothing. When Nedry said he was pushing code changes out on his own, nobody batted an eyelid. When door security systems went offline, they simply shrugged and said, "Well, Dennis told us a couple of systems would go offline, didn't he?" And carried on. This was not a culture of security. This was a culture of security negligence. Security wasn't a concern, and everyone from the staff to the management knew it. Which brings me to management's role in security processes. Now, we're protecting the identity of the CEO here because he was legally absolved from liability concerning the unfortunate events at the park. But does this sound familiar to anyone? A CEO that, quote, hates inspections because they slow everything down. A leadership team that only adds security after a breach. A management team that only does an external audit when their insurance company demands it. This company had problems from the top to the roots. But what should they have done? Well, first, overall accountability for compliance should have been assigned to an individual or team with a communications channel to executive management. Their attention and care sets the tone for the organization, helping to create that culture of security. Second, they should have implemented continuous audit techniques. And for me, nothing drives this home as well as PCI DSS requirement 12.4.2, which mandates that service providers perform their own internal reviews every 3 months to determine if security policies and procedures are actually being followed. They must take responsibility for their controls and verify business as usual tasks are taking place. This, combined with 10.7.3, demands a mature methodology for verifying security controls and responding to failures of security systems on a regular basis. Internalizing security. Now, one of those DSS requirements is for service providers only, but it's also best practice for merchants too. Both requirements also come with the added benefit of gathering and maintaining evidence that should make that annual assessment much more easy. And finally, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe the park should have thought a little bit more about some backup power for the Velociraptor cages. Am I right? At Dinosaur Park, security was a final addition that they tacked on when pressured by the insurance company. And the result was that they ended up with no real security at all. But we can all learn some lessons about the importance of security in our day-to-day activities from the incident at the park. As Bruce Schneier famously said, security is a process, not a product. Sorry, I realized I said that a bit too loudly. Let's hope nobody in the vendor area heard that. Shh, it's a secret. Don't repeat. So what can we take away from all of this? Security is everyone. Security is everywhere. Security needs to be happening all of the time. And when we include security within our daily practices, compliance follows naturally. Security becomes business as usual, almost naturally. Now, as a side note, Dinosaur Park's new CEO released a statement following the closure of the park, saying, "We deeply regret the mistakes made during the opening of the park. We've learned valuable lessons, and our renewed commitment to innovation and security will ensure our new upcoming park sets a new benchmark for safety." But I guess we'll just have to wait to see how that turns out. Thank you. Jeez.